Let's talk about a word that makes a lot of people uncomfortable: greed. We see it everywhere, but trying to have a real conversation about it? That usually just ends in a political shouting match. So today, we're going to explore how we can actually talk about it, constructively.
It's so weird, right? We can all feel the effects of greed, the cost of everything going up, the damage to our planet, this feeling that the system is kind of rigged. And yet, the moment you try to put a name on it, bam, you're on one side of a political fence, and the conversation just shuts down. It feels impossible.
But here's the thing. The consequences of unchecked greed, they don't care about your politics. They hit all of us, no matter who you vote for. This isn't really a left versus right issue. It's about the reality we are all living in together.
So how do we get past that stalemate? Well, the good news is there's actually a playbook for this. A way to have this conversation that, believe it or not, can actually bring people together instead of pushing them apart.
So the big secret here, it isn't about winning some political slugfest. It's about changing the frame of the entire conversation. We've got to shift the focus onto the harms we all experience and tap into those core values that, honestly, most of us share, no matter where we stand.
This quote just nails it. The fight against greed isn't a political issue. It's a human one. It's such a powerful reminder that underneath all the labels and the noise, we're all just people who want to build a decent world. That right there, that's our common ground.
All right, so where do we begin? Well, the very first step in this whole playbook is to get super specific. We need to point to the real, tangible harms of greed, the kind of stuff that everyone can see and feel in their own lives. First up, economic inequality. You know, when greed is the main driver, it acts like a giant magnet for wealth, pulling it all to the very top. For everyone else, that means wages that don't budge and fewer opportunities. This isn't some abstract chart in a textbook, it's the real-life struggle of millions of people working their tails off just to stay afloat.
And then, of course, there's what it does to our planet. That relentless chase for profit can lead to just reckless exploitation of our natural world. And we see the results all around us, from pollution to a changing climate that puts the health of the entire planet at risk for our kids and grandkids. That's a worry that cuts across every single political line.
And you know, the third big one? Trust, or the lack of it. Greed creates incentives for corruption, for unethical behavior, and it just chips away at our faith in big institutions, whether it's the government or corporations. It can even make us lose trust in each other, right in our own communities.
This really brings it down to street level. It's not just about these big, faceless systems. As the quote says, when greed gets put before the well-being of a community, you see a real decline in social cohesion. We all feel that. We all know what it's like when our neighborhoods start to feel more like marketplaces.
Okay, so we've found our common ground. We've identified the harms we all share. But that's just step one, right? How do you actually talk about this stuff in a way that people will listen to, instead of just making them defensive?
This is where the strategy gets really smart. It's about framing the exact same problem, greed, as the source of issues people already care deeply about. So, if you're talking to a conservative, maybe you focus on how megacorporations crush small businesses and threaten our personal freedoms. If you're talking to a liberal, you might connect it to social justice or environmental issues. See, you're starting from a place of we agree on this value, not you're wrong.
But look, facts and figures only go so far. To really get through to people, you have to make it personal. Abstract ideas don't get people off the couch, but stories. Stories do. Think about a family that can't afford medicine because of price gouging, or that local shop on the corner that had to close down. Those are the stories that make this problem feel real and urgent.
So we have our common ground and we have a way to frame the message. But talk is cheap, right? How do we actually turn all this new understanding into some real, tangible action? Here are 4 really practical things you can do. First, vote with your dollars. Support businesses that do the right thing. Second, use your voice. Advocate for policies that promote fairness and accountability. Third, just share what you know. Educate the people around you. And fourth, maybe the most important, create dialogue. Build spaces where people can actually talk about this stuff openly and find solutions together.
Okay, hang on for this last part, because we're about to look at this whole thing from a completely different and kind of mind-blowing angle.
I mean, think about it. For forever, really, we've treated greed as this personal flaw, right? A character defect. But what if that's not the whole story? What if there's something bigger going on?
This is such a cool idea. What if we started to see greed not just as an individual sin, but as a cultural issue, maybe even a public health issue? The idea here is that a culture that constantly pushes us to get more, well, that can be pretty toxic for our collective mental health. It shifts the conversation from blaming individuals to looking at the system we're all swimming in.
And this quote just sums up the spirit of that idea. It says this isn't about judgment or finger-pointing. It's about a culture we need to start thinking about. This reframe isn't about letting anyone off the hook. It's about starting a more helpful, more constructive conversation about the kind of society we actually want to live in.
So there you have it, a whole new way to think about and talk about greed. By focusing on what we share, speaking to people's values, and maybe even changing how we see the problem itself, we might actually be able to get past the gridlock. We all have that power. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. What conversation could you start today?